There's a quiet belief most people carry, and it sounds like truth. It sounds like honesty. You look at the things you haven't finished, the plans that never became real, the goals that keep resetting every Monday, and you reach a conclusion that feels accurate. Something is wrong with me. Not enough discipline, not enough consistency, not built like those people who actually follow through, and eventually you give it a name: lazy. But here's the part almost no one tells you. That label is usually wrong, because lazy people don't think about doing the work. They don't plan it. They don't care about it. They don't feel frustrated that they didn't start. But you think about it all the time. You plan it. You prepare for it. You even get excited about it. And then something small happens. A little doubt, a tiny discomfort, a quick distraction, and before anything real begins, you're gone. Not because you're weak, because your mind has been trained to leave. That's the truth most people never hear. This isn't a character flaw. It's a training pattern. And once you see it that way, everything changes. Over 100 years ago, in Japan, a young man walked into a dojo with the exact same problem. His name was Yamaoka Teshu's student. And his teacher was a man known not just for skill, but for something much harder to describe. Presence. Complete presence. Before we get into what happened, you need to understand who this man was. Yamaoka Teshu wasn't just another swordsman. He was trained from childhood. By his 40s, he was considered one of the most formidable fighters in Japan, but that's not what made people talk about him. It was his mind. Students who trained under him all described the same thing. When he was with you, he was fully there. No drifting, no divided attention, no hidden thoughts pulling him somewhere else. Just presence. If he was teaching, you had all of him. If he was training, nothing else existed. If he was silent, the silence was complete. And here's what matters most. He wasn't born like that. He built it. In his early years, his mind was just like anyone else's. Restless, distracted, unstable under pressure. Doubt would show up, and he'd follow it. Discomfort would appear, and he'd avoid it. Hard work would begin, and his focus would slip. Same pattern, same struggle. What changed him wasn't talent. It was 30 years of training one thing: a mind that stays. Now enter the student, a young man in his early 20s, committed, serious, capable, but stuck. He had been training for months. His technique was improving. His effort was real. But there was one problem he couldn't fix: focus. He would sit down to practice, set everything up perfectly, start strong, and within minutes, his mind would disappear. Not physically. His hand would still move, but mentally, gone. Thinking about something else, replaying a conversation, worrying about judgment, imagining failure. The work continued. But the attention was gone, and he knew it. He could feel the difference. The work looked fine, but something was missing, something he couldn't explain. After weeks of frustration, he finally went to his teacher. "I can't focus," he said. "No matter how hard I try, my mind keeps wandering." He paused, then said what most people eventually say: "I think I'm just lazy." Teshu didn't answer immediately. He just looked at him, carefully, then asked one simple question. "Do you want to do the work?" "Yes." "Do you think about it even when you're not doing it?" "All the time." Teshu nodded, then said something that changed everything. "Then you are not lazy." That moment matters more than it seems, because it reframes the entire problem. A lazy person avoids effort completely, but someone who wants to do the work and still can't stay with it, that's a different issue, and it has a different solution. Teshu stood up and walked toward the window, then said, "Your problem is not laziness. Your problem is that your mind has never been trained to stay." Let that sink in. Not broken, not weak, untrained, For years, he continued, your mind has been allowed to follow whatever appears. A thought comes, it follows. A discomfort appears, it escapes. A distraction shows up, it moves toward it. Over time, that becomes automatic, not a decision, a habit. And that's where most people get stuck. They think they need more willpower, more motivation, more discipline, but willpower fights the habit. It doesn't replace it, so every day feels like a battle, and eventually, you lose energy, not because you're incapable, because you're using the wrong tool. Teshu turned back and said something simple. You cannot solve a problem you have named incorrectly. That's the first principle. Name the problem correctly, because once you do, the solution becomes clear. You don't need more pressure. You don't need to push harder. You need to train your mind differently. Think about your own life for a second. How many times have you sat down to do something important, only to drift within minutes? How many times did you blame yourself, call it laziness, try to fix it with force, and then repeat the same pattern again the next day? That cycle isn't random. It's learned. Every time you followed distraction, every time you avoided discomfort, every time you delayed starting, you trained your mind. So now, when you sit down to work, it does what it has been trained to do, leave. And here's the shift that changes everything. You don't fix that by trying harder. You fix it by training something new. That's exactly what Teshu was about to teach next. Not discipline, not motivation. A completely different approach. One that doesn't depend on how you feel. One that doesn't break under pressure. One that actually works. And it starts with something most people misunderstand completely. Focus is not about holding your attention. It's about bringing it back. Again, and again, and again. That's where everything changes. There is a moment in every transformation where progress becomes invisible. Not because nothing is happening, but because everything important is happening beneath the surface. Kuji reached that moment in his 4th month. From the outside, he looked the same. Same routine, same posture, same quiet discipline in the dojo. But inside, something had shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a way that could be shown or measured, but in a way that changed everything about how he experienced his own mind. And this is where most people quit. Because they're waiting for something obvious, a breakthrough, a surge of motivation, a moment where it suddenly feels easy. But that moment rarely comes. What comes instead is subtle, quiet, almost unnoticeable. And if you don't understand it, you'll walk away right before it compounds into something real. Teshu understood this better than anyone. That's why he introduced Kuji to the next layer of training. Not harder, just deeper. Principle 7. Stop chasing motivation. One evening after weeks of consistent practice, Kuji approached Teshu again. I don't feel the same drive anymore, he admitted. At the beginning, everything felt intense. I wanted to improve. I was excited to train. Now, it feels flat, like I'm just going through the motions. Teshu didn't respond immediately. He dipped his brush into ink and continued writing for a few seconds before speaking. Good, he said. Kuji frowned. Good, he repeated. Teshu nodded. What you felt before was motivation. What you feel now is practice. Kuji stayed silent. Teshu continued. Motivation is unstable. It rises when something is new, when the idea of change is exciting, when you imagine what you could become. But it fades quickly, it always does. He placed the brush down. If your practice depends on motivation, your practice will disappear the moment motivation does. Kuji felt that, because that's exactly what had happened to him before coming to the dojo. Start strong, fade out, start again, repeat. So what replaces it? He asked. Teshu looked directly at him. structure, not inspiration, not emotion, structure. You don't wake up and decide if you feel like practicing, Teshu said. You wake up and practice because that's what you do. This is where everything shifts. Most people are addicted to motivation. They wait to feel ready, they wait for the right mood, they wait for the internal signal that says, now it's time. But that signal is unreliable. It comes and goes, and if your actions depend on it, your progress will always be inconsistent. Kouji had been chasing motivation without realizing it. Now he had something better. A system, morning returns, prepared environment, daily repetition, no negotiation. He didn't need to feel ready, he just needed to show up. And once he did, the process carried him. That's the difference between people who stay stuck and people who move forward. One group waits to feel like it, the other acts regardless. Principle 8. Identity follows repetition. A few weeks later, something subtle happened. Kouji was sitting in the dojo working on calligraphy. The same practice that had frustrated him months ago. The same brush, the same paper, the same movements. But this time, it was different. Not because the technique had changed, because he had. His hand moved steadily, his attention stayed. When his mind wandered, it returned almost instantly. No frustration, no internal struggle, just return. At the end of the session, he looked at his work. It was better than anything he had done before. Not perfect, but undeniably different. He brought it to Teshu. Teshu studied it quietly, then asked one question. Who made this? Kouji hesitated. I did, he said. Teshu shook his head slightly. No, the man who practiced every morning made this. Kouji didn't fully understand. Teshu explained. You think you are becoming disciplined, that you are forcing yourself to act differently. He pointed at the paper. But this is what actually happens. You repeat an action long enough, and it becomes who you are. This is the part most people miss. They try to change their identity first. I need to become more disciplined. I need to be more focused. I need to fix myself. But identity doesn't change through thinking. It changes through repetition. Kouji didn't become focused because he decided to. He became focused because he practiced returning. Hundreds of times, day after day, week after week, until returning became automatic, until focus wasn't something he tried to hold, it was something that happened naturally. This is how real change works, not through intensity, not through motivation, through repetition. You don't become consistent by trying to be consistent, you become consistent by doing something small, every day. Until it no longer feels optional. At that point, it's no longer effort, it's identity. Principle 9. Remove the drama. There was one more habit Teshu wanted Kouji to eliminate, and it had nothing to do with technique. It had to do with emotion. Every time Kouji had a bad session, he reacted. Frustration, disappointment, self-criticism, even when he returned his mind properly. If the session didn't feel good, he labeled it as failure. Teshu noticed this immediately. One morning after a particularly difficult session, Kouji approached him. I couldn't stay focused, he said. It felt messy, uncontrolled. Teshu looked at him calmly. How many times did you return? He asked. Kouji thought for a moment. 14. Teshu nodded. Then it was a good session. Kouji blinked. It didn't feel like one. Teshu leaned forward slightly. That is because you are still judging the session by how it feels, not by what you did. This is where most people get trapped. They attach emotion to performance. If it feels smooth, they call it success. If it feels difficult, they call it failure. But that's backwards. The difficult sessions are often the most valuable, because they contain more repetitions, more returns, more training. Teshu made it clear. "Remove the drama," he said. "No good session, no bad session, only practice." This is one of the most powerful mental shifts you can make, because once you stop labeling everything emotionally, you stop quitting based on feelings, you stop overreacting to small setbacks, you stop turning normal difficulty into a reason to stop. Instead, you just continue. Kouji started applying this immediately. Next session, his mind wandered. He returned again and again, no frustration, no judgment, just repetition. And something surprising happened. The sessions felt lighter, not easier, but cleaner, because he wasn't fighting himself anymore. He was just practicing. This is the level most people never reach, not because it's complicated, but because it requires letting go of the need to feel good while improving. Progress doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels boring. Sometimes it feels repetitive. Sometimes it feels slow, but that's exactly what makes it work. Kouji understood that now, and because of that, he didn't stop. He didn't reset. He didn't look for a new method. He kept going. Same practice, same structure, same returns, day after day, and that's where everything started compounding in ways he couldn't yet fully see. The real change wasn't coming from big moments. It was coming from consistency without drama. And once that locked in, there was no going back. By the 6th month, nothing about Kouji's routine looked impressive. No dramatic rituals, no extreme discipline, no visible struggle. If you watched him from the outside, you might miss it completely. He sat. He practiced. He returned his mind when it wandered. That was it. But inside, everything was different. Not because the world had changed, because his relationship with it had. And this is the final layer most people never reach. Not because it's hidden, but because they stop before it becomes real. Principle 10. Attention is your life. One morning, Teshu gave Kouji an instruction that had nothing to do with the dojo. "Today," he said, "I want you to practice outside." Kouji nodded, expecting something specific, a technique, a structure, a task. Instead, Teshu said something simple. "Whatever you do today, be there completely." That was it. No further explanation. Kouji left the dojo and walked into the city. At first, nothing felt different. The same streets, the same noise, the same movement of people going about their lives. But then he remembered the instruction, be there completely. So he tried it, walking, just walking, feeling each step, noticing the rhythm. When his mind drifted, he returned it. Same as always, then at the market, voices overlapping, movement everywhere, smells, sounds, distractions pulling in every direction. Normally his attention would scatter, but this time he stayed, not perfectly, but intentionally. Return after return, and something strange happened. The chaos didn't disappear, but it stopped controlling him. He could move through it without being pulled by everything. For the first time, he wasn't reacting automatically. He was choosing where his attention went. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about calligraphy. It wasn't about sitting still. It wasn't even about focus in the traditional sense. It was about control of attention. And attention is everything. What you focus on becomes your experience. What you return to becomes your reality. Most people don't realize this. They think life is happening to them. But most of what they feel is coming from where their attention goes. If your attention is constantly pulled by distractions, thoughts, fears, comparisons, then your experience becomes chaotic, unstable, uncontrolled. But if you can return it, even imperfectly, even slowly, then everything changes. Because now you're not reacting, you're directing. Kouji saw it clearly that day, not as an idea, as something real, and once you see that, you can't unsee it. Principle 11. Simplicity wins. When Kouji returned to the dojo, he expected feedback, some evaluation, some correction. Teishu listened quietly as Kouji explained his day. Then he asked one question. Did you return? Yes. That's enough. No praise, no expansion, just that. Because at this stage, nothing else was needed. Kouji had started to overthink again, trying to understand everything, trying to analyze the experience, trying to make it more complex than it was. Teishu stopped that immediately. The mind always tries to complicate what works, he said, because simplicity feels too small to be powerful. This is where most people go wrong. They think the answer must be complex, more techniques, more systems, more layers. But real mastery usually looks simple, not easy, but simple. Return your attention, do it again, repeat daily, that's it. Kouji's progress didn't come from adding more. It came from removing everything unnecessary. No overthinking, no emotional drama, no constant evaluation. Just practice. And that's why it worked. Because he could sustain it. That's the real test. Not what works once, but what you can keep doing. Principle 12. You become what you repeat. 6 months after he arrived, Kouji stood in the same dojo where he once called himself lazy. Same walls, same space, same teacher, but a completely different mind. Not perfect, still wandering sometimes, still requiring practice, but no longer controlled by distraction. No longer pulled in every direction, no longer stuck in that endless loop of starting and stopping. Teishu watched him quietly during one final session. Kouji sat. His mind wandered. He returned. No hesitation, no frustration, just return. Again and again. After the session, Teishu spoke. You think you changed your mind, he said. But what you actually did was change what your mind practices. Kouji understood. This was never about forcing control, it was about training response. Before, his mind practiced following. Now it practiced returning. And whatever you practice, you become. That's the final principle. You are not your intentions. You are not your plans. You are not even your goals. You are your repetitions. What you do daily that defines you. Not what you think about doing, not what you promise yourself, what you actually repeat. Kouji didn't transform because he wanted to. He transformed because he practiced differently. Small actions, repeated daily. No gap, no drama, no reliance on motivation, just consistent return, and over time. That became who he was. That's available to anyone, not in theory, in practice, right now. You don't need a dojo, you don't need a master, you don't need the perfect setup, you just need one thing, the next return. Your mind will wander, that's guaranteed. The only question is, what happens next? Do you follow it, or do you return? That moment, repeated enough times, becomes everything. Kouji walked into the dojo believing he was broken. 6 months later, he left with something most people spend their entire lives chasing. Not perfection, control. Not control over the world, control over where his mind goes, and that changed everything. Because once you have that, you can build anything else. Focus, discipline, consistency, all of it starts there. Not with force, with practice. One return, then the next. That's the path, that's the work, and it starts the moment you stop waiting and begin.